Good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to yet another edition of AQSA is Calling. My name is Faraz Patel. We'll be in your company for just less than an hour. Well, generally on AQSA is Calling, we'd have a crossing to Brother Ahmed in Gaza. And of course, we would have various guests coming on. But today we've decided to do things a bit different. For the next 1 hour, we are going to be having a three-people discussion. Of course, I'll be the modulator in the middle. And on one side, we are going to be having Naeem Jina, the Executive Director for the Afro-Middle East Center. And we also have Rolene Marks. Now, she is the co-founder of the South African Israel Policy Forum. Now, yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken paid both a visit to Israel and Palestine. And of course, in the United States to try and sort of strengthen their relations with each of these countries. So that's, of course, where we're going to be beginning this discussion, and I'm going to hand it over to Rolene first to, of course, answer this question and unpack Anthony Blinken's visit to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Rolene, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us on AQSA is Calling.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers.
No, it's an absolute pleasure having you. Rolene, I just want to get your take on obviously what had happened yesterday with Anthony Blinken's visit to Benjamin Netanyahu, and of course just how it went down in Israel.
Well, it was the first visit by the U.S. Secretary General, not just to Israel, but to meet with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas as well. And as far as we understand, the Secretary General will be going on to Cairo and to Amman in Jordan as well. And while he was in Israel, he met with the Prime Minister. He also met with our Foreign Minister, Gabi Ashkenazi, as well as our Defense Minister, Benny Gantz. And the purpose of his visit was largely to bolster the ceasefire that is in place between Israel and Hamas, which went into effect at about 2 a.m. on Friday morning. And there has been a period of very, very tacit calm in the region. And, he reiterated the United States' support for Israel's right to defend herself. But he also said that he will endeavor to ensure that reconstruction happens in Gaza, albeit working through the Palestinian Authority. And he also stressed the long-time commitment and friendship by President Biden, or of President Biden, to the state of Israel, which of course goes back many, many years. But I think the impetus now is how do we move forward? How do we break this never-ending cycle of violence between Israel and the Gaza Strip? And we look to solutions-based discussion. And, we all want to see reconstruction happening in the Strip. And of course, from our side, we want to know what kind of guarantees there will be in place to ensure that the people of Gaza receive any kind of aid, rather than it going towards the financing of more weapons and more tunnels. We want to see construction happening. We want to see infrastructure being built. We want to see commitment to education for peace. And we want to get to a point where we can move forward to some kind of peace in this region so that both peoples can live in dignity and respect.
Naeem, I want to take it over to you. Assalamu alaikum to you. Naeem, is there a way forward? We saw then, of course, that Anthony Blinken then went to visit Mahmoud Abbas. When listening to what was discussed between the two, there is, of course, aid that is coming from the UN via the US. So just your view on his visit to Palestine, and do you feel that there's still a way forward with regards to what had happened in the last few weeks?
Well, first, let me say that as an apologist for the apartheid state of Israel, Rolene should really not be saying that they want to see education and health and all of those kinds of things in Gaza. Israel has repeatedly, since 2006, almost every second year, bombed Gaza. Israeli spokespersons have used genocidal terminology such as wanting to bomb Gaza into the Stone Age. So when she makes it sound as if they're great humanitarians that want to uplift people in Gaza, it's frankly rubbish. What they want to do is what they're trying to do in Jerusalem ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. They want to reduce the people of Gaza to a level where they feel that their only future for them is to leave that area so that Israel can take over the entire Palestine. So please don't come with this nonsense about how great humanitarians Israelis are, wanting to see development in Gaza, etc. If that was the case, then stop bombing them and stop killing the civilians and children in Gaza. As to your question about what is the way forward, well, I mean, what does that mean, what is the way forward? We're not talking about something that happened over 2 weeks. We're talking about something that has existed for the past 73 years. The creation of Israel based on the forced expulsion of 750,000 Palestinians, taking over Palestinian homes, and thereafter the occupation 19 years later of the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem by Israel. Its violations of international law, its refusal to allow Palestinian refugees to return, which is a violation of international law and international humanitarian law, its settlement building, all of which are violations of international law. I think Rolina lives in one of those legal settlements. All of these are violations of international law. So when you say what is the way forward is, well, firstly, for Israel to abide by international law, dismantle all the settlements, allow Palestinians the right to return, deal with the question of Jerusalem, not in terms of annexation, but in terms of international law, deal with the water rights of Palestinians, the water that Israel steals in the West Bank, all of these issues. But what Israel wants, of course, is a Bantustan, where it will have a pliant leadership. So Trump's so-called deal of the century was ideal for Israel. You can call this thing a Palestinian state, but in fact, what it is a Bantustan that has less power, less independence than Bophuthatswana or Transkei did in the South African case, and continue doing whatever you want. Where Israel controls the borders, this so-called state has no right to defend itself. Israel controls even its digital spectrum, etc., etc. This is what Israel sees. The real way forward is international law, number one, and number two, to look at how you can create a state there that is democratic, where all people have equal rights and equal dignity is granted to all citizens.
Okay, I'm going to start.
I'd like to respond to that.
Okay, respond to that, please, Rolly.
First of all, I really hope that Naeem has gotten insulting me out of his system so that we can move on with a practical discussion.
Did I lie about anything?
And I live here in Modi'in. Modi'in is in Israel proper. It's not part of a so-called settlement.
Part of it is.
And let's talk about accusations of genocide, because we're now talking about a conflict between Hamas and Israel. And I don't think I need to remind you, Naeem. No, I'm going to get to your point. So, laugh, please, get it out of your system so that we can continue a productive discussion. And let's talk about the Hamas Charter, which is what the organization, if you want to call it that, is founded upon, which it calls for the genocide of the state of Israel. Let's talk a little bit about the Palestinian textbooks, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, which propagates education for hate, which I see as child abuse. Because if you want to create a so-called democratic state, you are educating your children to be nation builders, not guiding them where to stab people and educating them for hate. Yesterday, we saw footage of Yahya Sinwar holding up a child in the Gaza Strip who was holding a AK-47. That, to me, does not talk about promoting any kind of good future for your children. Let's talk about the Pay for Slay scheme. Let's talk about the billions of dollars of aid that has been sent both into the Gaza Strip and to the Palestinian Authority with the aim of building infrastructure, with the aim of laying down the foundations for a future state. Because make no mistake, Israel is not going anywhere. This one-state solution that you're propagating, you know it means the end of the state of Israel as it exists. We're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. So the only way forward, and please hand gesture as much as you want, the only way forward is to come to some kind of amicable divorce. Is it my understanding, Naeem, that you don't believe in peace, that you're not a peace builder. We can also talk about international law, and Israel is recognized internationally as a sovereign state and is bound by international law to defend her citizens. Let's look at the flouting of international law in the last couple of weeks by Hamas, the firing from within civilian infrastructure indiscriminately onto another civilian, the building of tunnels, the disguising of combatants as civilians, the incitement to genocide. I don't have to tell you that. Let me also remind you who fired those first rockets out of the 4,360 rockets that were fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel, 680 of them falling short in the Gaza Strip and killing several civilians. We know at least of 3 isolated cases, one where 2 children were killed by a rocket falling short, one where 3 children were killed by the misfiring of a rocket, one where a family of 8, including children, were wiped out. That, to me, speaks of a gross human rights violation by using your civilian population as a human shield. And when we can see an end to the education of hate, which has been addressed by UNRWA, in fact, funding towards UNRWA has been withheld because of the education towards hate, maybe then we can talk of a better future for children on both sides. But what my concern is that you don't seem to want to talk peace. You don't seem to want to look at the right of people on both sides to have a better future. You just want to sit there and accuse me of being all kinds of things, which is fine. If you have to resort to personal insults, I guess then that's what you have to do. And that, to me, doesn't speak of a productive way forward.
Okay, Rolene, I just want to, before I go to Naeem, okay, I know you said about education, and of course that is it. Now, what I'm about to say, I'm sure it's not a reflection of you as a person, but there's been the social media video that has been going around about Israelis calling for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. I want to get from you, Rolene, is that something you condemn? Because if that's what's happening, then there's also another side of it that says, hey, listen, there's another group of people who are calling for an ethnic cleansing of people. Surely that is something that you can condemn. So is that something that you condemn, Rolene?
If anybody is calling for the ethnic cleansing of anybody, Palestinian or Israeli or any human being, I outrightly condemn it. The same as I condemn any kind of videos calling for the ethnic cleansing of Israelis, and some of the videos and some of the invective I see on social media calling for the killing of Jews, not just in Israel, but around the world as a result of this conflict.
Okay, Naeem, I want to come to you now. I want to start to the root cause of this, of course, Sheikh al-Jarrah, what had been happening there. From your experience as being someone in politics and somebody who has seen this what has been happening in Palestine for so many years, surely that there, the security forces entering into Sheikh al-Jarrah was something that is definitely against every single international law.
I'm not against. I'm not involved in politics. I'm not a politician.
No. When I meant that your knowledge of it, your knowledge of politics.
To be fair, let me ask myself the question that you asked, Rolene. Do I condemn ethnic cleansing? Absolutely, 100%. From wherever it comes. But Rolene does not condemn, coming to your question, what happened in Sheikh Jarrah, which is ethnic cleansing, forced removals, removing people from their homes, and she's going to come and tell me that there's a property dispute and that an Israeli court ruled. You know, South African courts also ruled that forced removals of people from District 6 and from Fitas, etc., and Cato Manor were legal. It was legal. It doesn't mean it was just. It doesn't mean it was correct. Ethnic cleansing of people, removing them from their homes, creating 750,000 refugees in 1947-48, all of which Rolene would defend, is not only illegal, but immoral, unethical, and frankly, no decent human being can condone that. So when she says she condemns ethnic cleansing, does she condemn what happened in Sheikh Jarrah when racist fundamentalist settlers from Europe and the US walked into people's homes? And look, if it sounds, Rolene, like I'm taking this personally, I am. Some of those people in Sheikh Jarrah are friends of mine. When a racist fundamentalist settler walks into someone's house and throws old people and children out into the street, sometimes in the middle of the night, and takes over their homes with the support of Israeli security forces. That is ethnic cleansing. And don't come and tell me that some court belonging to an apartheid state condones it and says that it's legal. Sure, we had courts in South Africa that said it was legal to even torture activists. Our people who were killed by the apartheid state, court said that was fine. Because it is legal in an unjust state doesn't mean that it is that it is just. So that is what happened in Sheikh Jarrah. People who were removed from their homes, people who had lived there for generations. Now let me also say that many of the people from Sheikh Jarrah who are being removed, forcibly removed, worse than in our forced removals cases in South Africa, many of those people are already refugees. Some of them lived in what is now called West Jerusalem. And in 1967, when Israel invaded Jerusalem, and of course annexed it in 1981, invaded Jerusalem, many of these people were forced out of their homes. They ended up on the eastern side of Jerusalem in what is now called in Sheikh Jarrah, and have been living there since. But also, let me make this point, that while the focus has been on Sheikh Jarrah, for good reason, of course, Sheikh Jarrah is not the only suburb or neighborhood of Jerusalem where this is happening. Silwan, it has been going on for years, where people are being removed from their homes by these fundamentalist settlers who have, let me be clear, who have absolutely no lineage relationship to the land of Palestine whatsoever. Relationship. Neither they, nor their fathers, nor grandfathers, or grandmothers, or ancestors lived there. Okay? But they come in and they feel that they have the right to kick people out of their homes, take over their homes. But of course, that's not new. This has been happening from 1947. That's how we got 750,000 Palestinian refugees. Take over their homes and decide that those homes now belong to them. The fact that the law says that this is okay doesn't mean that it is okay. Let me also say, Rolin said about international law. In terms of UN Resolution 194, Palestinian refugees have the right to return to their homes. And in fact, in terms of Resolution 194, if Israel does not grant that right to Palestinian refugees to return to their homes, then Israel cannot be a member of the United Nations. Go and check the resolution. So Israel is technically, illegally a member of the United Nations because it has not abided by Resolution 194. We now have 6 million Palestinian refugees waiting to return to their homes.
Well, after the break, wait, Rolin, unfortunately, we have to go to a break. I am going to be coming to you immediately after that. Do stay tuned to AQSA is Calling. Welcome back to AQSA is Calling. Now, I know, Rolin, you wanted to make a comment just before we went to the break. I do apologize. But, Rolin, just before I obviously hand it over to you, these illegal removements of Palestinians who have been there for quite some time, and that's something that we have to, of course, accept. They have been there for a very, very long time. And I watched a documentary on another broadcaster, and what has been told is that they're coming in with security forces. So the families will come and they'll come in with their muscle, as it would be called, with the security guards to forcibly remove the people. Right? We've seen that video with regards to a gentleman by the name of Jacob who came in with his family, and of course he said, well, if I don't take it, somebody else is going to take it. And it resonates with me personally as a person who, of course, I didn't experience apartheid, but my grandparents, of course, saw it with their own eyes, how people were removed. For example, as Naeem mentioned, places like Fitas, Keita Manor, District 6. So I just want to get your view with regards to that, Rolin, because it also resonates to what happened in World War II when the Nazis, of course, invaded a whole lot of Europe, basically took Jewish people out of their homes, shoved them into the ghettos in Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe, and eventually took them out of the ghettos and threw them into the concentration camps. So I want to get your view on this, Rolin.
Well, first of all, I can understand why this is personally painful, and people being evicted from any place is personally painful for any of us. It's personally painful for me to know that Jews were also summarily kicked out of Arab countries, 850,000 refugees there, something that we don't talk about. Populations like in Egypt dwindled down to just 10 people. However, and again, the Sheikh Jarrah issue is one that is not just a couple of weeks old, it's decades old because it's an ongoing legal dispute. Israel, as a very robust democracy, does have people from both sides of the coin. Either you get people who are more right-wing and they're roundly condemned by the majority of us who do want to maybe enforce muscle, and you do have people from the left wing or the center here that have objected to it. But, and it cannot be stressed enough, it is still a civil legal dispute and nobody has been legally evicted yet. In fact, this case has been deferred by Israel's Supreme Court because of the explosive and because of the emotive nature of this case. In fact, one of the issues around it is that the people that were inhabiting these 4 homes were asked to pay rent and they have not taken that offer up. Nobody has been evicted yet. Yes, people come in with their muscle, and I must say it wasn't very nice for me to see people like Bezalel Smotrich and Ben-Gvir going into Sheikh Jarrah because they knew it was inflammatory, and that is why we need to come in with security, because it will start a potentially violent situation. And that is the truth of it. But nobody has been evicted from this place, and nobody has been evicted from Sheikh Jarrah. What has happened is it has been heavily politicized to suit an agenda. We can't forget that on the back of this, one of the reasons that we are seeing such explosions in the Middle East is because we have had an election that was supposed to happen in the Palestinian Authority areas, cancelled indefinitely by Mahmoud Abbas. And this has been highly, highly politicized to suit an agenda by Hamas.
Naeem, I want to come to you. Now, these Israeli courts that are currently having the matter, of course, of the land evictions. Now, we've seen in apartheid, of course, that what happens if a person of color goes to a court fighting, of course, against the minority whites who, of course, ruled the country at the time. Surely they didn't have confidence at the time. So as a Palestinian, if you put yourself in a Palestinian shoe, Naeem, surely you wouldn't have the confidence also of saying, will they really rule for me?
Well, of course you can't have confidence in that, Fahraz, especially when you have Israeli apologists lying that no evictions have taken place. I mean, that video that you referred to, that man Yaqub, who Muna was talking to, Muna al-Kurd, the woman in the video, who she clearly knew him. Why did she know him? Because of 3 years ago, Yaqub and his family moved in and forcefully took over half of Muna's house. 3 years ago, okay, forcefully took over half their house. They now are able to live in only half their house. So don't tell me that there's no evictions taking place in Sheikh Jarrah. This is happening. We saw on our television screens 3 weeks ago, where these crazy nutty settlers threw people out onto the street. In some cases, threw out their possessions with them, in others without. Okay, so don't say that there's no evictions taking place. These forced removals, well, maybe it's correct, no evictions taking place. These are forced removals by crazy racists. Okay, that's what's taking place. It's happening. We are seeing it on our television screen. Your question, no, Palestinians don't regard the Israeli courts as being fair. I mean, and they don't regard Israeli laws as being fair. Palestinians in Jerusalem are subjected to a whole range of property laws which don't apply to Jews in a particular way. They have to get a whole range of permits if they want to extend their homes, if they want to build, etc., and they don't get those permits. If they build without that, their houses get destroyed. Jerusalem is being slowly emptied of its Palestinian population, both Christian and Muslim, partly because of this kind of ethnic cleansing that's taking place, partly because of the attacks on places of worship, both Christian and Muslim. This is what is happening in Jerusalem. So how can Palestinians have faith in that judiciary, and in that legal system. No, they don't. But they try to do whatever they can. And in this case, in Sheikh Jarrah, it's not Palestinians who have gone to court. It's these crazy racists who have gone to court to get the court to give them the power to kick out the residents of that place. And as for the muscle, Fahraz, it's the crazy racists who have been accompanied by Israeli security forces. So Rolene might say she feels pained to see this happening see it happening on TV, but these guys are being accompanied and protected by Israeli security forces. As an Israeli citizen, is that something that you are complaining about? Something that you're lobbying against? That Israeli security forces are protecting these guys who are forcefully removing people from their homes? Come on, let's get real.
Rolene?
But I'm glad, Naeem, that you are an expert on Israeli law and that you have all these
I am, by the way.
and accounts of our Supreme Court. You will know that our Supreme Court, one of the most respected in the world, has often
Which is a joke, like the South African one was.
In favor of the plaintiffs. And that is not just a matter of Israeli public record, that is a matter of international record. But, while we're talking about crazy racists, how many Jews in Gaza? What happened in Gaza? What is a civil dispute in Jerusalem? Why does that necessitate the firing of over 4,000 rockets on Israeli civilians? Why does that necessitate that? Did we not pull out of Gaza in 2005?
Okay,
Why start a conflagration that only brings misery to both people? And now we're getting off topic, because the whole point of this discussion is to discuss the ceasefire and how we move forward from there. But allegations of racist, allegations completely unfounded of Israel doing racist things to Christian and Muslim holy sites, you're using that language intentionally because it's inflammatory and it's not true. You know that Muslim sites are taken care of by the Waqf. You know that the status quo for all religious sites, Jewish, Christian and Muslim, have the status quo where the freedom of religion is respected. I cannot go to some Jewish site without having to go with an armed escort because of the fear for my life. I want to know, when you talk about racist language and we hear language like, should there be a Palestinian state? No, Jew is allowed to live there. That to me is racist language. But we're getting off topic here. The topic here today was the ceasefire, the ceasing of the firing of rockets, the ceasing of retaliatory pinpoint strikes from Israel's side, and how we move forward. I would think if somebody is really sincere about peace and really sincere about a productive future for both people, that involves dignity and respect and national aspirations for both people, because both people deserve it, that is where the conversation should go towards. Building bridges, building infrastructure, creating some kind of semblance of peace. We see it happening with Israel and other Arab countries in the region. The whole sand and climate of the region is changing. And we see with our Abraham Accords between the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain, with Morocco, with Sudan, and hopefully soon to be joined by other countries who have seen how it benefits the people of the region. That is the direction that we want to be heading in, not the direction of allegations of racism and land theft and all the inflammatory language that you want to use and all the personal insults that you want to use, because that is not productive. The only thing productive here is working for a better future for Palestinians and Israelis. And like it or not, Israel is not going anywhere. So the only way forward is to look for solutions for both people.
Okay, no personal insults, please. I'm gonna ask if we refrain from that, please. But Naeem, your response to her?
Fahraz, look, using words like to describe, using words like colonialism, apartheid, occupation, genocide. Rolene might think these are inflammatory. I'm talking on the basis of international law, right? On the basis of international law, what Israel is doing is apartheid, is colonialism, is occupation, all of which are illegal under international law. Ethnic cleansing, we can debate about that. It's not certain. I believe that what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah is, Rolin might say not, but the others, there's no dispute about it. Under international law, this is what is happening. And Rolin, I would be, well, I shouldn't say I would be the first. I almost said I would be the first, but I would be among those who would fight to say that Jews should be able to live in a Palestinian state. There's nothing racist about that. The Jews that left Gaza were removed by the Israeli state. Why? Because they were settlers. Under international law, all of those settlements were illegal. Okay, so of course they had to they had to leave, and so too are all of the settlements in the West Bank, including in Jerusalem. These settlements are under international law illegal. They constitute acts of colonialism, and so they have to go. This is the reality. But should Jews be living in a Palestinian state? Well, there's nothing wrong with Jews living in a Palestinian state, or atheists, or Buddhists, or Hindus. We're not talking here about ethnocracy. We're talking about democracy. And in a democratic state, people should be able to live in those places. So, you know, that's not an issue as far as I'm concerned. I'm not against Jews. I'm not against Jews living in Palestine. That is not at all at issue. What is at issue is colonialism, apartheid, and occupation, all of which Israel is guilty of. Let me also make the point about Gaza and Sheikh Jarrah. As much as Israel might want to do this, separate Palestinians on the basis of their geography and in other ways, the fact is that there is a Palestinian people. In terms of the United Nations does not talk about occupied Palestinian territories. It talks about occupied Palestinian territory in the singular. And there's a good reason for that, because Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza are regarded under international law as one territory. The people of those areas are regarded as one people under international law. So when one part of that people is subjected to ethnic cleansing, then are we surprised when another part of the people says that these people need to be defended? When Mkhonto we Sizwe would set off a bomb at a police station in some small town in northern Transvaal, do we say no, but the forced removals took place in Natal, and so they shouldn't be setting bombs off in another province? These are one people. They defend each other. People were being removed. We all saw it on our television screens. As much as some of us might want to pretend like it didn't happen, we saw it on our television screens. Old women thrown out onto the street just after they had broken their fast for the whole day. And so what did we get? The resistance groups in Gaza decided that they wanted to send a message. Tactically, we can argue about whether such a thing is tactically good or not, but they decided they wanted to send a message. And let me also say, Fahraz, that when I say the resistance in Gaza, I'm deliberately saying and not saying Hamas, because the resistance in Gaza is not just Hamas. It is Hamas, or rather the armed wing of Hamas, the armed wing of Islamic Jihad, the armed wing of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the armed wing of certain Fatah elements in Gaza. Not all of them are Hamas, not all of them are Islamist, all of them have military wings in Gaza, and on occasions like this, as in 2014, as in 2008, 2009, as in 2012, they cooperate and work out this strategy together. So that's what I'm talking about with the resistance. So what did they do? They sent, 7 measly rockets towards Jerusalem that landed on the outskirts of the western side of Jerusalem in order to send a message, okay? More, I think, to send a message to the Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah to say you are not alone. But the result of that was a massive onslaught by Israel on the Gaza Strip, and this stuff about people, the resistance in Gaza being located in residential areas. The whole of the Gaza Strip is like a residential area. Frankly, it's 360 square kilometers housing about 2 million people. It's the most densely populated area in the world, okay? But talk to professionals in Gaza, talk to journalists in Gaza, talk to doctors, etc., in Gaza, and ask them about these rockets that are located and military installations that are supposedly located in UNRWA schools, that are located in hospitals, etc. And they will tell you that no such thing exists. And I'm not talking about Hamas people, okay? Ask the journalists from Al Jazeera and AP, which is an American news agency. When their building was bombed, or the building they were located in of 13 stories was bombed, and Israel claimed that this was a Hamas military installation. AP had been in that building for what, 13 or 15 years. AP is not dumb. AP is also biased towards the Americans. And the head of AP said that as far as they were concerned, there was no Hamas involvement in that building whatsoever. But the result of that, of course, was that 60-odd families, not people, 60-odd families were left homeless, roaming the streets without a home and without any possessions. So this stuff about using these as installations is really not true. I mean, none of the resistance factions in Gaza are doing that. In 2014, a school was bombed. Hospitals have been bombed because Israel claims that Hamas locates its weaponry in these places. And it's been proven that this is not the case. No shred of evidence has been given to show that UNRWA schools have had weaponry located in them, that these hospitals, Shifa Hospital that was bombed a couple of weeks ago, part of it, that it had weaponry located within them, that the building where AP and Al Jazeera was had weaponry or was a military base. No such evidence has been provided and can't be provided if it doesn't exist. It's like, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq in 2003.
Okay, wait, Rolene, hold on. Rolene, unfortunately, Rolene, I have to go for a break. I will definitely let you have your comment after this break. We will be back in just a few minutes. Stay tuned to AQSA is Calling. Welcome back to AQSA is Calling. Well, I'm going to go straight to Rolene. Rolene, you can go with your comment, please.
Well, color me confused, because 2 days ago, the co-founder of Hamas, Mahmoud Zahar, sat down with Sky News' Mark Stone and spoke about the fact that rockets were fired from within the civilian infrastructure indiscriminately onto our civilians, which, by the way, constitutes a war crime. In fact, all of those measly rockets fired from the Gaza Strip towards Jerusalem constitutes a war crime. We also, on the subject of no proof that rockets have ever been fired from within civilian infrastructure. Both Al Jazeera and France 24 in 2014, in the middle of their broadcast, saw rockets being fired from being embedded within their journalists. We also have a Finnish journalist who has said that rockets were fired from the parking lot of Shifa Hospital in 2014 while he was broadcasting. And then yesterday we had a very interesting situation with UNRWA. We had the director of UNRWA, his name is Matthias Schmale. He spoke about the pinpoint precision and the sophistication that the IDF used in order to mitigate civilian casualties. And he also said that food, medicine was continuing to come into the Gaza Strip. And he said that Israel was doing everything possible in its power to ensure as few civilian casualties as possible. Unfortunately, we have had a situation where rockets misfiring or landing short of Israel and landing in the Gaza Strip are killing and injuring civilians. But he was forced to apologize. He said apparently he had offended Hamas. Now, I wonder what Hamas did in order for him to have to walk back his initial comments. But Mahmoud Zahar was quite adamant and quite proud of the fact that They do not recognize, and when pressed on the issue of the use of civilians as human shields, he was quite emphatic about the fact. In fact, he said, by any means necessary. This is, to me, a gross abuse of your civilian population. I think, now that we have a situation of ceasefire and the international effort is looking at controlling any aid going into Gaza through the Palestinian Authority, and of course that will have to be coordinated with Egypt, because Egypt also has a legal maritime blockade in place, as does Israel, legal in terms of international law. International law, that's those systems of treaties and agreements between countries. And Egypt has a maritime blockade, and those blockades in for a reason, because of the dangers posed not just to Israel, but to Egypt as well by elements within the Gaza Strip. So now that we're talking roundabout, can we get back to how we improve the situation on the ground for the people of the Gaza Strip and for the people of Israel, so that in a few years' time, we don't have children on both sides terrified and running for shelter, that we have some kind of lasting calm and lasting peace, and that we can get on with the business of growing our national aspirations of both sides.
Okay, we've got basically 6 minutes, so it's 3 minutes for each of you. Roland, I want to start with you before I go to Naeem. All right, now I want to take the Hamas situation out, right? If they are found to have committed war crimes, if they are targeting Israeli civilians and citizens, then yes, surely the leaders of Hamas need to be held accountable. And I'm going to be the first to say that, yes, they need to be held accountable, because if you are using human shields, then I just feel that is a gross violation of every human right. And if they are targeting civilians, that is a gross violation of human rights. My understanding of war, the fancy English dictionary definition of war, is that two parties need to fight each other on a ground where no citizens or civilians are involved.
Absolutely.
Right. But let me get to my point now with regards to Benjamin Netanyahu. There is an investigation, of course, Amnesty International has launched it, in South Africa they've launched it, for Benjamin Netanyahu to be charged with war crimes, he and his cabinet. Roland, I want to find out from you, if this does go to the ICC, and if he is charged with war crimes, is that something you, as an Israeli and as a Jew, would accept?
Well, that's a very good question. First of all, we have to establish ICC jurisdiction over the area. And unfortunately for the ICC, Israel is not a signatory to that. Second of all, it has to be proven that Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet are in fact guilty of war crimes. At the moment, there are cases in Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu on other issues not related to war crimes. That has to be proven. Fortunately for Israel, what has been proven is that Israel does everything in its power, and this has been acknowledged by the international military community, to mitigate as much as possible any civilian casualties, including phone calls. And I was very distressed last week when audio was played by Sky Arabia of IDF soldiers begging civilians to exit a building, and the civilians saying, no, we're going to stay here, we rather want to die. That, to me, is terrifying. What is this for? What is this never-ending cycle for? And we do have it on authority by the international military community that no other army does what Israel does to mitigate these circumstances. The roof knocking, the sending of SMSs, the phone calls, the dropping of flyers. Unfortunately for me, as rockets were fired towards where I am in Modi'in, and it's quite a significant distance from the Gaza Strip, nobody warned me. No, I didn't get anything from Hamas to say, by the way, we're going to be firing rockets towards you. Any civilian death on any side is a tragedy and is regrettable.
Roland, sorry, I know we have time against us. I just need a yes and no from you. If he is found to be guilty of war crimes, would you accept that as an Israeli citizen? Yes or no?
If it is proven beyond a reasonable doubt with the evidentiary support and the intention, then absolutely, because it's a human right.
Okay, thank
you.
The
same as I would expect Naeem that if any Israeli civilian is found intentionally killed by Hamas to be a war crime, I would hope for him to say that.
All right, I'm going to leave the parting shot for Naeem. Naeem?
Well, firstly, Fahraz, maybe you should, clearly you have Rolin's contact details. If you pass on her cell number to the Hamas people, maybe they'll warn her the next time they shoot a rocket towards Modi'in, because that's what she wants. The fact is, 360 square kilometers with 2 million people, of course those people said they're not going to leave their homes. Where are they going to go to? There's nowhere to go to in Gaza. Imagine this. 360 square kilometers, this is like the distance from, on the one side, from Joburg to Lens, and 10 kilometers on width. That's what you're talking about, with 2 million people, okay? There's nowhere to run to, and this is the problem. I read some of these reports too, where families say, well, there's nothing we can do. We'd rather just be killed here, because, better than being killed on the street. This is the reality. I made the point earlier on about international law, and I don't make these points just because they sound nice. I believe in international law. Let's get Ismail Haniyeh and Benjamin Netanyahu to the ICC. Let them both agree to go. It seems that after 2014, Hamas has agreed that they would respond to any investigation, but the Israelis refuse, of course. Why? Because they don't want to be subjected to any international tribunal. The only tribunal they will be subjected to is their own. This has been the case all the time. So neither Netanyahu nor his military chiefs nor anyone else will go to the ICC. But let me just say that in terms of the Rome Statute, a state does not have to be a signatory to the Rome Statute to be taken to the ICC. If its victims, the state from which its victims is a signatory, then they can be. If a South African is killed in Gaza by Israeli bombs, then South Africa can take Israel to the ICC. And so hopefully, we will see justice taking place. But finally, what I too, Rolin, would like to see peace for Palestinians and Israeli Jews, and especially for Palestinians who have lived under 73 years of occupation. I too would like to see justice for all people. I too would like to see children not being killed anymore. And the way to do that is to ensure that we have a situation where people have democracy, equal rights, everyone is treated equally, everyone is respected, their dignity is respected, and they're not given rights and privileges on the basis of their ethnicity or their religion. This is the way to do it. This is the way we did it in South Africa, and certainly this is the way to do it there, and not a situation where people who have been made refugees are denied the return to their homes, while people who have no contact in terms of their lineage with that place are granted an automatic right to come there, like Rolin has been.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to end the discussion there. Naeem Jinnah, Executive Director, Afro Middle East Center, I say Jazakallah to you. And I say thank you to Rolin Mark. She's the co-founder of the SA Israel Policy Forum. Well, that's all we have for you here on AQSA is Calling. Do join me again, same time, same place tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.